stop. If you've got a flight booked in 2026, you need to hear this before you even step into the airport. A new screening system is being rolled out right now. It decides who gets pulled aside long before you reach the passport booth. Not after you land. Not during a casual chat with an officer. The decision is made while you're still in the air. And the most dangerous part? Most of the people who are being stopped haven't done anything illegal. They're not criminals. They're not trying to cheat the system. They're simply unaware. Right now, travelers are walking into airports with confidence, documents in hand, return tickets booked, certain everything is fine. 20 minutes later, some of them are sitting in a cold, windowless room, phone taken away, bags out of sight, facing hours of questioning they never expected. The officer at the desk didn't suddenly change their mind. The decision to single them out was already made before they ever stood in front of that counter. If you don't understand how this new system actually works, you could be next, especially if you fall into one particular category that is being quietly prioritized for extra scrutiny in 2026. Here's what almost no one explains clearly. When you walk up to a border officer today, they are not just looking at you and deciding if you seem suspicious. That judgment happened earlier while you were still en route. In 2026, border enforcement doesn't begin at the counter. It begins with an algorithm. How you bought your ticket, how often you fly, where you've gone, how long you stay, and even patterns in your online life are fed into a risk model before your plane lands. If that system sees something that doesn't line up cleanly with your stated purpose or your history, a flag appears on the officer's screen. At that point, sending you to secondary is not a choice. It's procedure. That's why smiling, dressing nicely, and answering confidently are no longer enough. You can't charm your way out of a data conflict. The system doesn't care how polite you are. It cares whether your behavior looks consistent and low risk on paper. This is why the people being detained in 2026 are not who most people expect. They're permanent residents who travel a little too often, visa holders who pack the wrong items, tourists who answered one question too honestly but in the wrong way, people who assume that because they've never had trouble before, they never will. The new system doesn't reward familiarity. It analyzes patterns. And here's the hard truth. Most travelers who get into trouble aren't willfully breaking the law. They get into trouble because they look messy to a machine. Small, careless details, things that feel harmless to a person, can look like fraud, plans to overstay, or unauthorized work when processed by software. This is not about scaring you. It's about preparation. Once you understand what the system is actually looking for, you can avoid triggering it at all. There are 8 silent rules driving who gets pulled aside in 2026. 8 traps that can turn a 2-minute entry into a 4-hour interrogation. One of them alone is behind more visa denials this year than anything else. Most people step right into it thinking they're doing nothing wrong, and the scariest part of this process isn't what happens in that back room. It's what happened long before you ever saw it. Before we go deeper, let me quickly introduce myself so you know why this matters. Hi, I'm Sophia. I spend my time analyzing what really happens to travelers at borders. Not the textbook rules people assume are being followed, but the patterns that are actually being enforced today. What I'm going to share isn't theory or old airport stories. These are the exact triggers catching people now under the 2026 screening model. If you understand these rules before you travel, you don't just feel calmer. You avoid situations that can cost you hours, your visa, or even your immigration status. There are 8 of these rules. Once you hear them, you'll see how easy it is to step into trouble without meaning to. Let's start with the first one, because it involves something every traveler carries, and that most people handle in exactly the wrong way. The first rule starts with what's in your pocket, your phone. There's a dangerous myth going around online, pushed by viral videos and self-proclaimed experts, saying you can simply refuse to unlock your phone at the border and nothing bad will happen. That advice is reckless. At U.S. ports of entry, the legal standards are different than they are inside the country. If a CBP officer asks to inspect your phone and you refuse, they don't just give up and wave you through. They can seize the phone and hold it for weeks. They can send it for forensic analysis. And if you're entering on a visa or ESTA, they can decide not to admit you at all. But that's not even the most common mistake travelers make. The real trap is what people do to their phones just before they land. A lot of travelers think they're being cautious by deleting apps, wiping chats, or clearing photos right before arrival. They uninstall WhatsApp, Signal, messaging apps, clear email, delete pictures, often while they're still on the plane. On the surface, that feels like a privacy move. To forensic tools, it looks like evidence destruction. The tools used at major ports of entry don't only look at what's currently on your device. They can detect when large amounts of data were removed. If the system sees a mass deletion event shortly before you landed, you stop looking like a normal traveler. You look like someone trying to hide something. 5 gigabytes wiped an hour before arrival doesn't look like I'm careful. It looks like I'm scared. Once that suspicion is triggered, everything slows down. You need to change the way you think about your phone at the border. Empty is suspicious, normal is safe. Your goal is not to look perfect, your goal is to look ordinary. That means your normal photos stay, your everyday chat threads stay, your typical apps stay. A regular, boring digital life looks far less risky than a phone that's been suddenly scrubbed. If you truly have sensitive material, work files, private conversations, the smart move is to back them up and remove what you don't need well before your trip, not the night before, and definitely not during the flight. Clean up in advance, calmly, not at the last minute in a panic. And there's one simple step that matters more than almost anything when you approach the inspection line. Power your phone all the way off. Not just turning off the screen, not just airplane mode. Fully off. A powered-off device is treated differently from one that's on and unlocked. Certain types of access and searches require more legal steps with a fully powered-down device. A phone that's just locked but still on doesn't offer the same protections. This isn't about hiding wrongdoing, it's about not tripping automatic suspicion flags. The travelers who get into trouble here aren't hackers or criminals. They're people who panicked and made big changes at the worst possible moment. If you remember nothing else from this rule, remember this. Don't make sudden changes. Don't panic delete. Aim to look predictable and boring. That alone prevents a lot of unnecessary questioning. Now let's move to something even more obvious than your phone, and just as risky when it doesn't match your story. What you're dragging on wheels. This is one of the quickest ways people get sent to secondary inspection, and most of them don't realize what they did wrong. Imagine this. You land after an overnight flight. At the counter, the officer asks, "How long are you staying?" You answer calmly, "Just 2 weeks visiting my sister." But right behind you are 4 huge suitcases, a bulky winter coat, and a couple of taped cardboard boxes. To you, it means you've packed carefully. To an officer, and to the risk system, it suggests something else. Your stated duration doesn't match your baggage. This is called duration mismatch. It's one of the easiest red flags to spot. When your luggage doesn't match the length or purpose of your stay, the assumption is not comfort. The assumption is that you may be moving, not visiting. Officers are trained to look for signs someone intends to stay longer than they're allowed. Too many clothes, multiple pairs of work shoes, framed family photos, kitchenware. These items aren't just things, they are clues. If you say you're staying for 10 days but you're packed like you're relocating, the algorithm doesn't argue with your explanation. It marks your case as higher risk. Once that happens, officers go looking for confirmation. Bags are opened. They look for signs of a life being moved. CVs, professional tools, personal documents. Evidence that you're not just a guest but planning to stay. The mistake many people make is thinking they can fix it by explaining afterward. By the time you're explaining, the concern already exists. The key is to keep a mismatch from appearing in the first place. Either travel light so your luggage naturally fits your story, or if you do need extra bags, frame them clearly and early. For example, I'm staying for 2 weeks. These 2 extra bags are gifts and traditional clothes for my sister's wedding. One answer is vague. The other is specific, plausible, and complete. Luggage without context looks like intent to stay. Luggage with a sensible reason looks normal. The system isn't judging your feelings, it's checking for consistency. And while bags can get you pulled aside, the next rule is the one that completely destroys visas and trips. It's hitting thousands of people who truly believe they're doing nothing wrong, especially remote workers and professionals who think modern work has changed immigration rules. It hasn't. The next trap is the belief, I work remotely so I can work from anywhere. That belief collapses at the border. If you enter the US on a tourist status while including B1, B2, STA, or similar, any work you perform while physically inside the US can be considered unauthorized employment, even if your employer is outside the US. You're paid into a foreign bank. You're only checking emails or joining a couple of calls. Under US immigration law, working is about what you do while in the country, not just where the money comes from. The real danger here is not what you intend to do, it's what you admit to. This is how it typically happens. The officer asks, "What do you do for work?" You say, "I'm a software engineer, marketing manager, marketing consultant." No problem so far. Then they ask, "Will you be working while you're here?" Because you don't want to lie, you say something that feels honest but harmless. Just a bit. I'll check emails, maybe join a couple of Zoom calls. That single sentence can get your entry refused. You've just told the officer you plan to work during your stay. They don't need more proof. They can deny admission on that basis alone. In some cases, this can also lead to flags on your file and future issues. This is why bringing a full work laptop setup with external drives and active communication apps can be risky if you're entering as a visitor. If an officer inspects the device and sees current work projects, chat notifications, and active collaboration tools, it matches the exact pattern the system is trying to catch. The border doesn't care that remote work is normal. It only cares about whether your planned activities match the status you're using to enter. The only truly safe approach if you're coming as a tourist is total disconnection from work while you're inside the US. No, just a little. No, only emails. If asked what you do, answer it simply. If asked whether you'll be working, the correct answer, if you're entering as a visitor, is clear. You are on vacation leave. You will not be working during your stay. If you can leave your work devices at home, do so. The inconvenience of being offline for a while is nothing compared to being turned away at the border. This rule feels unfair to many people. But the border is not a fairness test. It's a compliance check. In 2026, this is one of the primary ways the system decides who doesn't belong in the visitor lane. Now let's talk about money, because this is where a lot of travelers who have done nothing wrong accidentally look like they have. Most people have heard of the $10,000 rule. If you bring more than $10,000 into the US, you have to declare it. So travelers try to be clever by staying just under the number. One person carries $9,000. A couple splits cash between them. A family divides it across several bags. On the surface, that feels like staying safe. In reality, that behavior is called structuring, intentionally splitting amounts to avoid a reporting threshold. It is treated as a very serious attempt to circumvent the law. If an officer realizes that cash was divided on purpose to stay under the declaration level, they don't just tell you off. They can confiscate all of it. And yes, that can happen even if every cent is legal. This is where many people misunderstand the rule. $10,000 is not a cap. It's a reporting point. You are allowed to bring in more. $20,000, $50,000, $200,000 or higher. The law doesn't ban the amount. It requires you to tell them about it on a form. Declaring doesn't mean paying a tax. It doesn't mean automatic fines. It doesn't automatically send you to interrogation. It's a transparency requirement. Trying to avoid that form by splitting, hiding, or smuggling is what makes you look like a risk. Families fall into this trap all the time. One adult carries $9,000. The spouse carries another $9,000. A grown child carries $5,000. No one person crosses the $10,000 mark, so they assume they're fine. They're not. Officers look at the total amount of currency a traveling group is bringing in. If the combined sum is over $10,000 and it was not declared, that's a violation. The safest move is the simplest. Declare all of it, honestly. Check the box. Walk through the red lane if required. Fill out the currency form and say, We are carrying X dollars in cash. That's it. 5 minutes of paperwork is infinitely better than having your money seized and then spending months trying to get any of it back. The people who get punished here aren't drug dealers. They're ordinary travelers who thought hiding or splitting cash made them safer. At the border, openness beats cleverness every time. And just when you think being helpful and honest will definitely protect you, there's another trap, one that catches families constantly. This one isn't about what you carry, it's about how you talk. You're traveling with a spouse, a parent, or someone whose English is weak. You're nervous and you want to help. The officer asks your mother a question. She pauses. Without thinking, you jump in and answer for her. She's visiting her grandchildren. You think you're being helpful. To an officer trained to spot control and coercion, it can look like the opposite. When one person consistently answers questions for another without being asked to translate, it raises immediate concern. Officers are trained to watch for signs that one traveler might be controlling another. Human trafficking, coercion, abuse. Once that suspicion appears, the response is predictable. Separation. You will be taken to one room. The other traveler goes to another. Each of you is questioned alone. The same questions are asked. Then the answers are compared line by line. If your stories don't match, even on small details, the situation escalates fast. This is how families who are doing nothing wrong end up in hours of secondary inspection. Not because of a lie, but because of an interruption. There is a correct way to handle language issues, but it has to happen before the questioning begins. If your family member doesn't speak English well, you should say so right away before they're asked substantive questions. For example, "Officer, my mother speaks limited English. May I translate for her?" Then you wait for a clear yes or no. If you're allowed to interpret, help. If you're not, you stay quiet. Asking for permission signals cooperation. Jumping in without being asked looks like you're controlling the narrative. This is doubly important with children, spouses, and older relatives. Let each person answer for themselves as much as they can. Silence is safer than finishing their sentences. Officers aren't judging whether you're nice. They're testing whether information seems authentic and independent. When answers come from the right mouth, the system relaxes. When they don't, it tightens. These last two rules catch people because they go against everyday instincts. In normal life, we split money to avoid risk. We speak up to help loved ones. At the border, those same instincts can create problems. The safest travelers aren't the ones who talk the most or try to be clever. They're the ones whose behavior is simple and unsurprising. They declare when they're supposed to. They let each person speak for themselves unless asked to interpret. They don't try to game a system that doesn't understand intentions, only actions. Now, let's look at something so small most people never think about it. But that's causing long delays every single day. Your medication. Pills, vitamins, painkillers, supplements. Many travelers save space by mixing everything into unmarked plastic bags, generic organizers, or old containers. That single decision can bring your entry to a standstill. In 2026, scrutiny around medications and pharmaceuticals has increased sharply. When an officer or inspector finds a baggie of unidentified pills, they do not assume it's just aspirin. They assume it could be something much more serious until proven otherwise. To you, white tablets in a sandwich bag may be your daily blood pressure meds. To a system looking for fentanyl and other illegal drugs, they look like unlabeled contraband. Even if the medicine is fully legal, the way you carry it matters. Original packaging and labels are important. If pills are loose or in unmarked organizers, officers may have no choice but to hold you and the medication until it can be tested or verified. That can mean lengthy waiting, extra searches, and possibly missing connections. There's another layer here: carrying someone else's prescription, a spouse's anxiety medication, a parent's heart pills, a child's ADHD meds. If the name on the label isn't yours, it raises questions. Some classes of medication, like strong painkillers, stimulants, sedatives, are especially sensitive. Adderall, Xanax, some codeine products, and similar drugs can trigger additional screening even when prescribed appropriately. The safest way to carry meds is clear and strict. Keep prescriptions in their original pharmacy bottles or blister packs. Make sure the name on the label matches your passport. Don't mix different drugs into the same container. If a medication is likely to raise questions, bring a copy of the prescription or a doctor's note, ideally in English. The people delayed or denied over pills are rarely traffickers. They're travelers trying to save space. At the border, clarity matters more than convenience. While medication issues center on what's in your bag, the next rule is about your overall travel rhythm. It surprises frequent flyers more than anyone else. Many people believe that flying often makes them look trustworthy. They have airline status, TSA pre-check, and a long history of uneventful trips. Surely that means the system trusts them? Not exactly. To the 2026 model, a particular pattern of frequent travel doesn't look like loyalty. It looks like courier behavior. Here's the pattern that raises eyebrows. Short trips in and out, repeated regularly. 3 days here, fly home. 2 weeks later, 3 days again. Again and again. For you, it might be visiting a partner, checking on property, or dealing with business. To a risk algorithm, it can look a lot like the pattern used by people moving contraband or cash. Fast, frequent entries and exits. When that pattern is detected, your risk score changes. The result? More secondary screenings, more detailed questions, more thorough searches. This is where being unprepared hurts people. They assume their travel record speaks for itself. It doesn't. If you travel often on short visits, you need to be able to clearly explain why you come and go so much, and how you support yourself in between. Vague answers like, "I just like to visit," are not enough. You'll need to show ties and stability outside the U.S., proof of a job, business, or retirement income, proof of a residence, family, or obligations that require you to go back. The system wants to see that you have a clear reason to leave, that you're not using frequent short trips as a way to effectively live in the U.S. without proper status. It's not the number of trips that hurts you. It's the lack of a clear story behind them. Frequent travelers who move through smoothly are the ones whose documents and explanations present a stable picture. Those who can't explain their pattern are the ones who get flagged again and again. And then there's the last rule, the one that hits hardest. It affects the travelers who feel safest. Permanent residents. Green card holders. People who believe that once they have that card, the hardest part is done. Here's a reality most people don't learn until it's almost too late. Your status as a permanent resident is not valid for 10 years. The plastic card may have a 10-year expiration date, but your right to that status depends on one thing: keeping the United States as your real home. If you treat your green card like a long-term visa rather than proof of residence, the 2026 system will eventually notice. This is where what I call the 6-month creep appears. It starts with one long trip abroad. You stay outside the U.S. for nearly 5 months, then come back briefly. A few weeks later, you leave again for another long stretch. You tell yourself you're being careful because you never stay away more than a year. You think you're safe because no single trip breaks the 1-year rule. But the system is not measuring just each trip. It's measuring your overall pattern. If over time you spend more days outside the U.S. than inside, the conclusion is simple. You no longer truly live in the U.S. You're just visiting. At the airport, that can become one of the most stressful conversations a green card holder can face. An officer reviews your record and says something like, "You've been outside the country too much. It appears you may have abandoned your residence." Then they take out a form, I-407. It may be described as routine or a formality. They might say it will make things easier, or that you can always apply again later. They may call it voluntary. What they're often not saying clearly is that signing that form gives up your permanent resident status immediately, right there in that office. Many people sign it because they're exhausted, scared, or feel pressured. Later, they realize they gave up something they'd spent years trying to get. And it's extremely hard to undo. You need to know this. You do not have to agree to surrender your green card at the airport. If you believe you have not abandoned your residence, you have the right to decline to sign and to ask for your case to be decided by an immigration judge instead. The exact words matter less than the idea. Something like, I do not wish to give up my status. I would like a hearing before an immigration judge. They can take your card physically and give you other papers, but your status remains until a judge makes a decision. This scenario is heart-wrenching because it almost always involves people who thought they were doing the right thing. Caring for parents abroad, managing a foreign business, dividing time between countries. In 2026, those patterns are being tracked and questioned much more aggressively. If you hold a green card, your travel history needs to clearly show that the U.S. is still your main home. Short trips abroad, yes. Long stays with consistent returns and strong U.S. ties, often fine. But treating the card as a travel pass rather than proof of residence is asking for trouble. And if you're ever pressured at the port of entry, remember, any easy solution they offer you in that moment is more convenient for the system than it is for you. So where does all of this leave you? In 2026, every traveler falls roughly into 3 risk levels, whether they know it or not. There's a low-risk zone, U.S. citizens and green card holders who spend most of the year in the U.S., tourists with short, straightforward trips, clear itineraries, return tickets, hotel reservations, and no work devices. For these travelers, answering questions plainly and staying calm is usually enough. There's a medium risk zone, green card holders who spend 5 to 11 months a year abroad, people carrying substantial cash, those visiting partners or fiancés, travelers with complicated medication or travel histories. These people aren't doing anything wrong, but they should carry proof. Proof of ties, income, return plans, and medical need.